An exciting story of redemption, love, passion, and new beginnings. She was just an invisible maid, until a dark millionaire discovered her most intimate secret. From that moment, her life became a dangerous game between passion, power, and buried past. But what he wanted from her was much more than her body. Isabel Hayes wasn't born to be seen. At 25, she had perfected the art of becoming invisible, gliding through the velvet corridors of the Grand Palace Hotel like a shadow that cleaned up after the powerful without leaving traces of her own existence. In New York City, where luxury and poverty danced a cruel waltz under the same scorching sun, Isabel had found her place in the middle of the golden machinery that sustained the dreams of the American elite. She had come from rural Virginia with a cardboard suitcase and a notebook of poems she had never shown to anyone. Raised by her stern grandmother in a town forgotten by Highway 81, daughter of a father who disappeared even before her birth, and a mother who promised to return but never did, Isabel learned early that surviving meant not bothering anyone, not questioning, not dreaming too high. At 18, when her grandmother died, leaving only debts and the heavy silence of the adobe house, she sold everything she could and bought a bus ticket to the capital. New York received her with the brutal indifference of big cities. For 2 years, Isabel jumped from job to job, from boarding house to boarding house, learning that in the magnificent city there were many wonders, but none were for her. Until she got the position at the Grand Palace Hotel. The hotel, a symbol of New York ostentation, where businessmen closed billion-dollar deals between drinks, where politicians wove agreements in presidential suites, where the cream of American society came to wash their reputation with sea salt and the gold of unlimited credit cards. Isabel worked the night shift when the hotel breathed differently. It was the hour of secrets, of furtive lovers, of shady deals sealed with French champagne and Colombian cocaine. She cleaned up the evidence of what high society didn't want the world to know. Glasses with lipstick in 2 different colors, torn, documents in wastebaskets, disposable syringes hidden behind Italian leather sofas. With silent movements and eyes that saw more than they should, Isabel had become a specialist in erasing the traces of the powerful, as if trying to erase herself. The night shift supervisor was Dolores, a 50-year-old woman with bleached hair and always impeccable nails, who treated the employees like generals treat foot soldiers. Dolores knew all the hotel's secrets but pretended not to know anything. She was a practical woman. She knew that silence was worth more than salary, and that turning a blind eye guaranteed more stability than having a conscience. She liked Isabel because the girl didn't ask questions, didn't gossip in the locker room, didn't try to seduce rich guests. She was reliable in her invisibility. That March night, when the New York summer was beginning to take its last breaths before autumn, Dolores was particularly irritated. 2 employees had missed work, one because of a sick child, another because of a drunk husband, and the schedule was shorthanded. The hotel was full. It was Fashion Week, and the Grand Palace had transformed into the epicenter of American fashion. International models, famous designers, textile executives, and renowned photographers occupied the most expensive suites, leaving behind a trail of glitter, cocaine, used condoms, and empty wine bottles that cost more than Isabel's monthly salary. "Hayes," Dolores called her, consulting her clipboard with the list of rooms. "You'll take the 25th floor today, and be careful. There are important people staying up there." Isabel took her cleaning cart and went up in the service elevator, watching the numbers change on the digital display. The 25th floor was sacred territory in the hotel. That's where the penthouses were, the presidential apartments, the golden refugees of American and foreign billionaires who came to New York to mix business with pleasure. She rarely worked on that floor. It was a privilege reserved for the most senior employees, those Dolores trusted not to touch anything they shouldn't, not to see anything that could compromise the hotel's reputation, not to hear conversations that could change the course of the national economy. The 25th floor corridor was a universe apart. Persian rugs covered the Italian marble floor, paintings by famous American artists decorated the walls, and the air conditioning maintained a perfect temperature that contrasted with the suffocating heat of the city below. Isabel started with Suite 2503, where an agribusiness executive had left a mess of papers, dirty glasses, and a strange red stain on the carpet that she preferred not to investigate too deeply. It was when she finished 2503 that she noticed the error in the spreadsheet. Dolores had noted Suite 2501 on the list, but Isabel knew that Penthouse had been occupied for 3 months by the same guest, a man who paid the hotel's most expensive daily rate and who never allowed staff to enter his rooms. She hesitated for a moment, looking at the double-carved wooden door. Dolores had probably made a mistake. It was probably better to go back and ask. But Isabel was an exemplary employee. She followed orders without questioning, and Suite 2501 was on the list. She knocked lightly on the door. Silence. She knocked again, a little harder. Nothing. She used the master key and opened slowly, pushing the cleaning cart into the suite. What she saw made her forget to breathe. Penthouse. 2501 wasn't just a hotel room. It was a parallel world suspended between the sky and the sea of New York City. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, from the Empire State Building to Central Park. Italian-designed furniture mixed with contemporary American art pieces. Bookshelves filled with books in various languages shared space, with canvases that seemed to have come directly from a museum. The aroma in the air was a mixture of Cuban cigar, Scottish whiskey, and something more subtle, more dangerous, like the scent of a predator marking its territory. And he was there, sitting in a leather armchair facing the window, observing the city as an emperor contemplates his kingdom, Nathan Victor Blackwell. She recognized him immediately, although she had never seen him in person. His face had been plastered on business and society magazines for years, always with the same controlled expression, always with the same eyes that seemed to hold secrets capable of destroying governments. Nathan Blackwell was a legend in the world of American fashion. At 38, he had built an empire that extended from the runways of New York to luxury stores in Paris. Models competed to work with him. Designers dreamed of having their creations approved by him. Businessmen tried to decipher his methods for transforming unknown brands into billion-dollar marks. But 3 years ago, something had changed. After the inexplicable suicide of his fiancée, Italian top model Sofia Ricci, Nathan had disappeared from the international scene. Some said he was crazy, others that he was dead. But there he was, alive, real, dangerous. He didn't turn when she entered. He continued observing the city, a glass of whiskey in his right hand, a Cuban cigar smoking in the crystal ashtray next to the armchair. Isabel tried to silently back away, but the almost imperceptible squeak of the cleaning cart's wheel finally made him turn his head toward her. Nathan Blackwell's eyes were exactly as she imagined a shark's eyes would be, cold, calculating, capable of evaluating prey in seconds and deciding if it was worth devouring or just ignoring. He studied her for a long moment, from her brown hair tied in a simple bun to the navy blue uniform she wore with pride, because it was the first work clothes that really belonged to her. "You shouldn't be here," he finally said, and his voice had that aristocratic New York accent, mixed with something more perhaps European, acquired during the years he had lived between Paris and Milan, building his empire. I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwell. There was an error in the schedule. I'll leave immediately." Isabel began to pull the cart back, but he raised a hand, a small gesture that seemed to have the power to stop the world. "Stay," he said, and it wasn't a request. Isabel stayed, not out of obedience, but out of something she couldn't name. A morbid curiosity, perhaps, or fear, or the strange sensation that this encounter wasn't chance but destiny, fulfilling an agenda she didn't know. Nathan rose from the armchair with the grace of a predator in no hurry. He was tall, taller than she imagined from the magazine photos, and his body had that natural elegance of men who were born knowing the world belonged to them. He wore a white linen shirt with sleeves rolled up to the elbows, tailored pants that probably cost more than the apartment where Isabel lived, and his feet were bare, a detail that made her feel strangely intimate with someone who was practically a stranger. What's your name? He asked, approaching slowly, like someone approaching a wild animal that might flee at any moment. Isabel. Isabel Hayes. Isabel, he repeated, as if testing the taste of the name on his tongue. Pretty name. Isadora Duncan was a dancer, did you know? She died strangled by her own scarf when it got caught in the wheel of a car. What irony, isn't it? A woman who dedicated her life to freedom of movement, killed by an accessory. Isabel didn't know what to answer. His casual erudition made her uncomfortable, as if he were demonstrating a power she didn't possess, an education she never had, a world of references that was completely foreign to her. Do you drink wine? He asked, already heading to an improvised bar on one side of the room. Not during work, sir. I'm not asking about work, I'm asking about you. He opened a bottle that Isabel couldn't identify, but by the sound of the cork and the reverence with which he handled it, must have cost a fortune. Do you drink wine? Rarely. Why rarely? The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked why she didn't drink wine. People simply accepted that Isabel Hayes was a simple woman, with simple tastes, who didn't have access to the fine things in life, and probably didn't even want them. I'm not used to it, she answered, and it was the most honest answer she could give. Nathan served 2 glasses, one with red wine that shone like liquid blood, another with water. He offered both to her. Choose. Isabel looked at the 2 glasses. It was a simple choice, but she felt there was something more behind it, a test she didn't fully understand. Nathan waited patiently, and in that silence she could hear her own heart beating faster than normal. She took the water. Nathan smiled, and it was the first smile she saw on his face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just confirmed a suspicion. Interesting, he murmured, taking a sip of the wine she had rejected. Are you afraid of losing control? I have responsibilities. We all have responsibilities, Isabel. The question is, which ones are worth more than our happiness? It was a philosophical question that she wasn't prepared to answer. Isabel drank her water in small sips, watching Nathan observe her. It was like being inside an aquarium being studied by a marine biologist. She knew she should leave, finish her shift, return to her small apartment in Brooklyn, and pretend this encounter had never happened. But something kept her there. Something that was part fascination and part terror. Why do you work here? He asked, settling back in the armchair, but this time turned toward her. I need to work. That's not an answer. It's an evasion. Why do you work specifically here in this hotel, cleaning the rooms of people you'll never be? The casual cruelty of the question hit her like a slap, not because he was wrong, but because he was too right. Isabel worked at the Grand Palace because it was the best opportunity she had found, but also because there was something masochistic about being so close to a world that was closed to her. It was like pressing a finger against a wound, just to remember that it still hurt. Are you trying to humiliate me? She asked, and her voice came out firmer than she expected. I'm trying to understand you. Nathan tilted his head to the side, like a cat studying a bird. You're different from the other employees of this hotel. They look at me and see money, power, an opportunity for life change. You look at me as if I were a problem that needs to be solved. I'm not looking at you. Turn anyway. Yes, you are, and that's exactly what intrigues me. He stood up again and walked to the window, gesturing for her to approach. Come here. Isabel hesitated. Getting closer to him meant entering even more deeply into that game she didn't understand. But something in his voice, a natural authority that didn't need to be imposed, made her obey. From the window the view was breathtaking. New York spread out before them like a carpet of lights, from the projects that climbed the hills to the mirrored buildings of Manhattan. The parks formed a golden line that separated the city from the rivers, and in the distance, the Statue of Liberty blessed everything with her raised arm. What do you see? Nathan asked, standing behind her, close enough for her to feel the heat of his body, but not so close that she felt threatened. The city. Be more specific. Isabel looked again, trying to see beyond the obvious. I see contrasts, beauty and poverty, dreams and reality, all mixed, coexisting in the same space. And where do you fit in this landscape? The question made her turn to face him. Nathan was closer than she had calculated, and for a moment their eyes met in a way that made her feel as if he were reading her soul like an open book. I don't fit in, she answered honestly. I just exist between the spaces. Between the spaces, he repeated, and there was something in his voice that she couldn't identify. What a perfect description for a woman who cleans up others' secrets without leaving a trace of her own existence. Isabel felt a strange vulnerability, as if he had just exposed something about her that she herself hadn't realized. It was true. She lived between the spaces, in the intervals between others' lives, always present but never participating. May I ask a personal question? Nathan said, returning to the bar to serve himself more wine. Isabel nodded, although part of her wanted to say no. Have you ever been touched by a man? The question hit her like lightning, not for the explicit content, but for the surgical precision with which he had identified a truth that she kept as her most intimate secret. At 25, Isabel was a virgin not by religious or moral choice, but by a combination of shyness, lack of opportunity, and mainly fear. Fear of being vulnerable, of being judged, of not being enough. She didn't answer, but the blush that rose up her neck and took over her cheeks was answer enough. Nathan nodded slowly, as if he had just confirmed a theory. I thought so. How? How did you... Your body language, the way you keep distance, how you instinctively protect yourself, the way your eyes avoid when the subject becomes minimally intimate. And mainly, he paused, taking a sip of wine, the way you're reacting. Now, an experienced woman would be offended or amused by my boldness. You're terrified. Isabel felt like running, like grabbing her cart and leaving that place, that encounter that was becoming too dangerous for her emotional balance. But her feet didn't obey, as if they were glued to the marble floor. Why does that matter to you? She managed to ask. Because, Nathan approached again, stopping at a distance that was simultaneously respectful and intimate. I used to collect women like other men collect cars or works of art, models, actresses, socialites, businesswomen, sophisticated, experienced women who knew exactly what they wanted and how to get it, and all of them bored me to death. He extended his hand, and with a delicacy that contrasted with the intensity of his eyes, lightly touched her face, just with the tips of his fingers. But you're a mystery, a woman who hides in plain sight, who cleans up others' excesses but never allows herself any excess of her own, who rejects expensive wine to drink water, who works in a palace but lives like a prisoner. The touch was light, but Isabel felt as if he were burning her skin. She instinctively backed away but couldn't break eye contact. I need to go, she murmured. Do you? Yes, I have other rooms to clean. The other rooms can wait. Nathan let his hand fall but continued looking at her with that disturbing intensity. Can you wait? It was a question loaded with meanings that Isabel wasn't prepared to decipher. She grabbed her cart and headed for the door, but before leaving, she turned to face him one last time. Mr. Blackwell, why have you been staying here for 3 months? Why haven't you returned to your world? Nathan smiled again, but this time the smile was sad, like someone carrying a weight that no one else could see. Because sometimes running away is the only way not to completely destroy what's left of yourself. Isabel left Penthouse 2501, with more questions than answers. She finished her shift on autopilot, cleaning the remaining rooms without really seeing what she was doing. When she finally returned home, it was morning, and the sun was beginning to paint the New York sky with golden tones. In her small apartment in Brooklyn, with a view of the Greenwood Cemetery, Isabel sat on the bed, holding her notebook of poems. For the first time in years, she wrote something new. There are men who are storms, and women who are safe harbors. There are men who are oceans, and women who are deserted islands. But what happens when an island meets an ocean and discovers that it has always been part of the same submerged continent? 3 days later, when Isabel arrived for her shift at the hotel, Dolores was waiting for her with a sealed envelope. This came for you, the supervisor said, with an expression that mixed curiosity and concern. No sender. Isabel opened. The envelope in the employee's locker room. Inside, an elegant card with few words handwritten in a masculine and confident calligraphy. Isabel, I have a proposal for you. Not related to what happened in my room, but perhaps a consequence of it. If you're interested in changing your life, come to the Hotel Terrace tomorrow at 11 p.m. If you don't come, I'll understand that you prefer to continue existing between the spaces. I respect any decision you make. NVB. Isabel read and reread the note until she memorized it. A proposal, a chance for change, an invitation to leave the empty spaces where she had built her life and enter into... What? She didn't know. But for the first time in a long time, she felt that she had a real choice to make, a choice that would change everything. Isabel spent the next 24 hours living two lives simultaneously. During the day, she performed her tasks at the hotel with the same precision as always, but her mind was completely elsewhere, analyzing each word of Nathan's note, each implication of that mysterious proposal. During the night, she lay in her narrow bed, looking at the cracked ceiling of her apartment, imagining scenarios, weighing risks, trying to understand what a man like Nathan Blackwell could want with a woman like her. The following night, at 10:45, Isabel found herself climbing the hotel's service stairs toward the terrace. She had changed out of her uniform into a simple navy blue cotton dress, the only one she owned that could be considered minimally adequate for a meeting, although she didn't know if it was really a date or just a business meeting. Her hair was loose for the first time in years, falling in natural waves to her shoulders, and she had applied a discreet lipstick she had bought at the corner drugstore. The terrace of the Grand Palace was a world suspended between earth and stars. During the day, it served as a recreation area for the most illustrious guests, with an infinity pool that seemed to merge with the Hudson River. At night, it transformed into an open-air salon where the New York elite organized exclusive events. But on that Thursday night, it was completely empty, illuminated only by the city lights and by a full moon that reflected in the pool water like liquid silver. Nathan was there, as promised. He wore a dark suit without a tie, the white shirt, open at the first button, and was smoking another of his Cuban cigars while observing the city below. When he noticed her presence, he turned, and for the first time Isabel saw a genuine smile illuminate his face. "You came," he said, and there was a note of surprise in his voice, as if he really wasn't sure she would appear. "I came," Isabel replied, maintaining a safe distance, "but I still don't know why." Curiosity, boredom, desperation? Nathan took a puff on the cigar and put it out in an improvised ashtray. "The reason doesn't matter. What matters is that you're here." He gestured to a small table that had been prepared with 2 chairs, a bottle of American champagne in an ice bucket, and a tray with canapes that looked like they had come from a 5-star restaurant. Isabel wondered how he had managed to organize that without anyone from the hotel knowing, but then remembered that men like Nathan Blackwell didn't ask if something was possible. They simply made it happen. "Please sit down," he said, pulling out a chair for her with the antiquated gallantry of someone who had been educated in the best European schools. Isabel sat down, still suspicious, watching him serve champagne in 2 crystal flutes. The golden foam bubbled like little stars on the surface, and the aroma that rose from the liquid was different from anything she had ever smelled. "I hope you don't mind," Nathan said, noticing her hesitation. "It's Dom Perignon 2008, not American. I know, but sometimes we need to honor the French." "Mr. Blackwell—" "Nathan," he interrupted her softly, "if we're going to work together, I prefer that you call me by my name." "Work together?" Isabel took the glass but didn't drink. "I still don't know what your proposal is." Nathan settled into the chair across from her, and even sitting maintained that imposing presence that seemed to dominate the environment. "I need a personal assistant, someone I can completely trust, who is discreet, intelligent, and who doesn't have hidden ambitions in relation to me or my money." "And you think I'm that person?" "I think you're exactly that person." Nathan took a sip of champagne, savoring the liquid before continuing. "In fact, I think you can be much more than that." "More like what?" Someone who helps me find my way back to the world, or at least who helps me decide if I still want to return. There was a vulnerability in these words that completely contrasted with Nathan Blackwell's public image. In magazines, he always appeared as a relentless conqueror, a businessman who had built his empire through determination and calculated coldness. But the man sitting in front of her seemed to carry a weight that no fortune could alleviate. "Why me?" Isabel asked. "There are thousands of women in New York who would be more qualified for this job." "Because," Nathan leaned forward, resting, his elbows on the table, "all those women would see me as an opportunity. You see me as a problem." "I didn't say that." "You didn't need to. It's written in your eyes every time you look at me. You don't want anything from me, and that's exactly what I need right now." Isabel finally tried the champagne. The liquid went down her throat, leaving a complex flavor, with notes of fruit she couldn't identify, and an effervescence that made her feel as if small bubbles of happiness were exploding in her mouth. "What would my job be, specifically?" she asked. "Organize my schedule when I decide to have a schedule again. Filter calls and emails. Accompany me to meetings when I decide to have meetings again. Handle my correspondence. Ensure that I maintain minimal contact with the outside world." Nathan paused. "And mainly, be a constant, but non-invasive presence. Someone who is there but who doesn't judge when I can't get out of bed for 2 days in a row." The brutal honesty of the confession caught her off guard. Nathan Blackwell, the fashion magnate, the man who appeared on magazine covers as a symbol of American success on the international scene, was admitting that sometimes he couldn't get out of bed. There was something deeply human in this revelation, something that touched her in a way she didn't expect. "How much would you be willing to pay?" she asked, trying to keep the focus on practical aspects so as not to be carried away by emotion. $15,000 a month to start. Housing at the hotel, all meals included, comprehensive health insurance, and a personal budget of $5,000 monthly for clothes and personal expenses. Isabel almost choked on the champagne. $15,000 was more than she earned in 6 months working at the hotel. It was an amount that would completely change her life, that would take her from subsistence and put her on a level of comfort she had never imagined for herself. "It's a lot of money," she said, suspecting there must be a catch somewhere. "It's the salary that a quality personal assistant deserves in the international market," Nathan replied simply. "And considering that you would be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it's even conservative." 24 hours a day? "Not literally, but I have episodes, anxiety attacks, nightmares, moments when I need someone present to anchor me in reality. This can happen in the middle of the night. Weekends, holidays, you would need to be available." Isabel realized that she wasn't being hired just as a personal assistant. She was being hired as a kind of emotional nurse, a stabilizing presence for a man who was clearly dealing with deep traumas. "What happened to your fiancé?" she asked before she could control herself. Nathan remained motionless for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, more controlled. "Sofia Ricci was one of the most sought-after top models in Europe. Beautiful, intelligent, ambitious. We met at a fashion show in Milan and it was love at first sight, at least on my part." He drank more champagne, as if he needed liquid courage to continue. "We got engaged after 6 months of relationship. I thought she loved me. She thought I was a stepping stone to an even better life." "And what happened?" "She discovered she was pregnant. My child." Nathan looked at his own hands, which trembled almost imperceptibly. "I was euphoric. I started making plans for the wedding, for the family we would form, but Sofia panicked, said that a child would ruin her career, that she wasn't ready to be a mother, that she preferred to wait a few years." "And you?" "I said that we could hire the best nannies in the world, that she wouldn't need to give up her career, that I would take care of everything. But she had already made her decision." Nathan's voice became a whisper. 3 days before our wedding ceremony, Sofia took an overdose of sleeping pills. She left a letter saying she couldn't live a life that wasn't hers." Isabel felt a tightness in her chest. The pain in Nathan's voice was so palpable that she wanted to reach out and touch him, but she restrained herself. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I was sorry too. For a long time I blamed myself. I thought that if I had been more understanding, if I had pressured less, if I had given her more time to process the pregnancy—" Nathan shook his head. "But then I found her real diary. Not the one she left for the press, but the real diary, hidden in her apartment. And I discovered things that changed everything." "What kind of things?" Nathan hesitated, as if deciding how far he could trust her. "Things that made me realize I never really knew Sophia. That perhaps she died not because of the pregnancy, but because of secrets she was carrying. Secrets that could destroy more lives than just hers." Isabel felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something in the way Nathan talked about Sophia's secrets that made her suspect they still weren't buried with her. "Is that why you're in New York?" she asked, "running from those secrets?" "Initially, yes. But now—" Nathan looked at her with an intensity that made her feel as if she were being X-rayed. "Now I think maybe I came here to find someone who could help me face them." The silence that followed was charged with tension. Isabel drank her champagne in small sips, trying to process everything she was hearing. She was being offered an opportunity that would completely change her life, but she was also being pulled into a story that seemed dangerous. "If I accept," she finally said, "I want to make it clear that I'm not interested in anything beyond a professional relationship." Nathan smiled, but there was something sad in that smile. "Isabel, if I wanted a lover, I could buy a dozen of them without leaving the hotel. What I need is much rarer and much more valuable than sex." "What do you need?" "Someone who sees me as a human being, not as a symbol of success, not as a source of money, not as a trophy, just as Nathan." He paused. "When was the last time someone looked at you and saw Isabel, not the hotel employee who cleans rooms?" The question hit her like a punch to the stomach, because the answer was obvious. Never. No one had ever looked at her and seen beyond the surface, beyond the function she performed in the world. "We have more in common than you imagine," Nathan continued. "We both live versions of ourselves that other people created. I am the successful magnate. You are the invisible employee, but who are we really when there's no one watching?" Isabel finished her champagne and placed the empty glass on the table. "When would I start?" "Tomorrow, if you want, or next week, if you need time to organize yourself. And if it doesn't work out, if I can't handle your episodes, then you leave and take 3 months' salary as compensation. No resentment, no drama." Nathan extended his right hand. "Do we have a deal?" Isabel looked at the extended hand. It was an elegant hand, with long fingers and well-manicured nails, but there were small scars on the knuckles that told stories she didn't know. It was the hand of a man who had fought for something, who had built an empire with his own hands. She shook his hand. "We have a deal." The change happened surprisingly quickly. The next day, Isabel handed in her resignation at the hotel, to the complete shock of Dolores, who couldn't understand how an exemplary employee could simply abandon a stable job. She didn't lie completely. She said she had gotten an opportunity as a personal assistant, but omitted to whom. 2 days later, she was moving into a suite on the 10th floor of the Grand Palace. It wasn't as luxurious as Nathan's penthouse, but for someone who had spent the last few years sharing a tiny apartment with a co-worker, it was a palace. Marble bathroom, king-size bed, balcony with a view of the city, minibar always stocked, and 24-hour room service. It was like living in a dream. Nathan had left 3 sets of clothes for her, chosen by a personal shopper he had hired. Elegant but discreet feminine suits, silk blouses, Italian leather shoes, minimalist accessories. Everything in the right measure, everything of impeccable quality. Isabel wondered how he had discovered her size with such precision, but then remembered that Nathan was a man who had built an empire in fashion. Evaluating body measurements was probably instinctive for him. On the first official day of work, she went up to Penthouse 2501 at 9 in the morning, as agreed. Nathan received her already dressed and apparently ready to start the day, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he had slept little. "Good morning, Isabel," he said, and she noticed that his voice was a little hoarse. "Ready to discover what life is like in the eye of the hurricane?" He led her to an improvised office that had been set up in one of the penthouse's rooms. 2 desks, state-of-the-art computers, phones, printers, and piles of correspondence that seemed not to have been touched for months. "This is your kingdom," Nathan said, gesturing to one of the desks. "Everything here needs to be organized, catalogued, answered, or discarded. Emails, letters, invitations, commercial proposals, contracts, legal documents. Some are important, others are garbage, and some—" He paused. "Some might be dangerous." "Dangerous how?" "You'll know when you see." Nathan sat behind the other desk, which was clearly his. "For now, let's start with the basics. My schedule was completely empty 3 years ago. Now I need to decide which commitments are worth resuming." Isabel spent the first hours familiarizing herself with the systems, the contacts, the chaotic way Nathan had managed his life in recent years. It was like trying to organize a library after an earthquake. Letters from lawyers mixed with invitations to fashion shows, commercial partnership proposals were buried under piles of personal correspondence, and million-dollar contracts were being used as notepads. "My God," she murmured. Holding a contract for a clothing line worth $12 million that had expired 2 years ago due to lack of response. "I told you it was a hurricane," Nathan commented, without raising his eyes from the computer screen. As the days passed, Isabel began to understand the complexity of Nathan's life. During the day, he was functional. He spoke on the phone with lawyers, reviewed commercial proposals, held virtual meetings with executives of his company in Manhattan. But at night, something changed. It was as if a shadow descended over him, making him silent, distant, haunted. The first time this happened, Isabel didn't know how to react. It was a Thursday night and they were working late when Nathan simply stopped in the middle of a sentence and stared at nothing. His eyes became glassy, his breathing irregular, and his hands began to shake. "Nathan," she called softly. He didn't respond. He was there, but at the same time he wasn't. It was as if he were seeing something she couldn't see, hearing something she couldn't hear. Isabel approached slowly, speaking in a low and calming tone. "Nathan, you're safe. You're here with me, in the hotel. There's nothing wrong." It took almost 15 minutes for him to come back completely. When he did, he was sweating and shaking as if he had just run a marathon. "Sorry," he murmured, avoiding looking at her. "Sometimes You don't need to apologize," Isabel said, offering him a glass of water. "Does it happen often?" "More than I'd like to admit." It was that night that she truly understood what her role in Nathan's life was. It wasn't just organizing his schedule or filtering his emails. It was being an anchor, a point of stability amid the emotional chaos he carried. And the more time she spent with him, the more intrigued she became. Nathan was a man of extreme contrasts. He could be gentle and vulnerable 1 hour, cold and calculating the next. He had moments of humor and lightness that made her laugh genuinely, followed by periods of melancholy so deep that she felt like hugging him and never letting go. But it was on a Friday night, exactly 2 weeks after she started working for him, that Isabel discovered Nathan's first real secret. She was organizing some documents in the office when she heard a strange noise coming from his room. It sounded as if someone was dragging furniture, or perhaps breaking objects. Concerned, she went to investigate. The bedroom door was ajar, and she could see Nathan in front of an easel, painting ferociously. His hands moved as if possessed, applying paint to the canvas with a violence that contrasted with the delicacy of his usual movements. He was dirty with paint up to his elbows, with red splashes on his face and white shirt. And what he was painting made her freeze in horror. It was the portrait of a woman, a beautiful woman, with blonde hair and blue eyes, whom Isabel immediately recognized from photos she had seen on the internet. Sofia Ricci. But in this portrait, the model's eyes were scratched, torn by something sharp, as if someone had tried to erase them from the canvas. Nathan painted compulsively and murmured something that Isabel couldn't completely understand. He seemed to be talking to the woman in the painting, as if she were alive, as if she could hear him. Isabel silently backed away, her heart racing. There was something deeply disturbing about that scene, something that suggested that Sofia Ricci's death still wasn't resolved in Nathan's mind. When she returned to the office, her hands were shaking as she tried to focus on work. But it was impossible to erase from her mind the image of Nathan obsessively painting the face of the dead woman, destroying her eyes repeatedly. That night, Isabel couldn't sleep. She stood on the balcony of her suite, looking at the sea, wondering what kind of situation she had gotten herself into. Nathan had said he needed someone to help him face the secrets of the past. But what if those secrets were darker than she had imagined? What if Nathan wasn't just a victim of circumstances, but something much more dangerous? It was almost 3 in the morning when she heard a soft knock on her door. When she opened it, Nathan was there, still with paint on his hands, still with that lost look that she was beginning to recognize. "I can't sleep," he said simply. "Neither can I. May I come in, just to talk? I promise I won't do anything inappropriate." Isabel hesitated for a moment, then opened the door completely. Nathan entered and sat in the armchair near the window, looking at the sea as if seeking answers in the waves. "You saw me painting," he said. "It wasn't a question. I did. And now you're wondering if you made the right choice in accepting to work for me." Isabel sat on the bed, maintaining a safe distance. "I'm wondering if you're okay." Nathan laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "That's a very complex question, Isabel. I'm alive, I'm functional most of the time, I'm managing to work again. Does that make me okay? Do you paint Sofia every night?" "Not every night, only when she appears." "When she appears?" Nathan looked at her, and Isabel saw something in his eyes that made her understand that they had crossed a line. That, from that moment on, she would no longer be just his assistant. She would be his confidant, his accomplice, his anchor in a reality that sometimes seemed to slip through his fingers. "Sometimes I see her," he said softly. "Sofia. She appears in the corners of my vision, always wearing that white dress she wore at our last dinner together, and she whispers things to me." "What kind of things?" "Secrets, truths she never told me when she was alive, names of people she knew, places where she was, things she did." Nathan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "And sometimes she tells me about you." Isabel's blood froze. "About me?" "She says you're not who you appear to be, that there's something in your past that connects with hers, that our meeting wasn't a coincidence." Isabel felt as if the floor were moving beneath her feet. "That's impossible. I never knew Sofia Ricci. I didn't even know who she was until you told me." "I know it sounds crazy," Nathan said, getting up and walking to the window. "And maybe it is. Maybe I'm creating connections that don't exist because I desperately need to believe there's a purpose in all this. But Isabel," he turned to face her, "have you ever wondered why you don't have any memories of your parents, why your grandmother never wanted to talk about them?" The question hit Isabel like lightning. It was something she had wondered thousands of times during childhood and adolescence, but had learned to accept as part of her personal history. Abandoned children didn't always have answers about their origins. "What are you insinuating?" "I'm not insinuating anything. I'm just saying that sometimes the past has a way of catching up with us, even when we think we've left it behind." Nathan sat down again, but this time closer to her. "Tomorrow, if you want, I can show you Sofia's diary. The real diary, not the one the police found. Maybe you'll find some answers there." Isabel knew she should say no. She knew she was being pulled into something that could be dangerous, or at best would feed the fantasies of a traumatized man. But curiosity was stronger than fear. "All right," she said. "I want to see the diary." Nathan nodded slowly, as if he had just sealed a pact that would change everything between them. "Then tomorrow you'll meet the real Sofia Ricci, and perhaps in the process discover the real Isabel Hayes." Isabel could barely sleep after the conversation with Nathan. She lay in bed looking at the ceiling, trying to process everything he had insinuated about possible connections between her and Sofia Ricci. It was impossible. She was a girl, from rural Virginia, daughter of unknowns raised by her grandmother in a town that didn't even appear on the most detailed maps. Sophia was an international top model, born into a rich family in Milan. There was no way their stories could intersect. But then why did Isabel's mind insist on revisiting fragments of whispered conversations between her grandmother and the neighbors? Words cut off when she entered the room, loaded silences when she asked about her parents, looks of pity that she had never fully understood. Her grandmother always said that some stories were better buried, that stirring up the past only brought unnecessary pain. When the sun finally began to rise over New York, painting the sky in golden and rosy tones, Isabel got up and took a long shower, trying to prepare herself for whatever Nathan was going to reveal to her. She chose one of the suits he had provided for her, a dark gray ensemble that made her feel more professional, more protected, as if the expensive clothes could serve as armor against the truths she was about to discover. When she arrived at Penthouse 2501, Nathan was already awake, sitting at the breakfast table with a cup of coffee in his hands and his gaze lost in the urban landscape that stretched below. He wore only pajama pants and a white t-shirt, and there was something vulnerable in this informality that made Isabel's heart race. His hair was disheveled, as if he had run his hand through it several times, and she could see the marks of insomnia around his eyes. "Good morning," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. Nathan turned and smiled, but it was a tense smile, like that of someone about to commit a crime and not sure if he's doing the right thing. "Good morning, Isabel. Did you sleep well?" "Not really, and you?" "I haven't slept well for 3 years." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit down. Have you had breakfast?" Isabel shook her head, and Nathan poured coffee for her in a porcelain cup that probably cost more than her former monthly salary. The coffee was strong, with a rich aroma that made her sigh with pleasure. "So," she said after a few sips, "are you going to show me the diary?" Nathan nodded, but didn't move immediately. "Before I show you, I need you to understand something. What you're going to read may completely change your perception of who you are. If you prefer to continue living without these answers, I'll understand. I've already spent 25 years without answers. I think I can handle the truth. The truth might be worse than ignorance." Isabel put the cup on the table with more force than she intended. "Nathan, stop trying to protect me from something I don't even know what it is yet. If there's any connection between me and Sophia, I need to know." Nathan studied her for a long moment, as if trying to read her soul. Finally, he got up and walked to a bookshelf that occupied one of the walls of the room. Isabel watched as he moved some volumes, revealing a small safe built into the wall. He typed in a password and removed an object that she immediately recognized, a red leather diary with a golden lock. "Sophia wrote every day," Nathan said, returning to the table and placing the diary between them as if it were a bomb about to explode. "Since she was 15. This is her last diary, which covers the final 2 years of her life." Isabel looked at the object with a mixture of fascination and terror. It was strange to think that those pages contained the most intimate thoughts of a dead woman, secrets she had taken to the grave. "The police found a different diary in her apartment," Nathan continued. "A fake diary which she created in case someone found it, but this is the real one. I found it hidden in a safe in the room she kept in my apartment in Manhattan. Why did you never give it to the police?" "Because..." Nathan opened the diary on a page marked with a blue silk bookmark. "After reading it, I understood that delivering this diary would destroy many more lives than just mine." He slid the diary across the table to her. Isabel looked at the open page and saw a feminine handwriting, delicate, written in English with some passages in Italian. "Read," Nathan said simply. Isabel began to read, and as the words formed, in her mind, she felt as if the world was changing shape around her. March 15th, 2021. "I discovered something today that could change everything. I was reviewing the documents I found in Mark's office when I stumbled upon something I shouldn't have seen. A birth certificate. Not just any birth certificate, but one with my fake name. Sophia Ricci doesn't exist. She never existed. I am Sophia, Silver, daughter of John Silver, and... My God, how is this possible? How could my mother have had another daughter and never told me? Isabel stopped reading, her heart beating so loudly she could hear it in her own ears. Silver was my mother's maiden name. Keep reading, Nathan said softly. March 25th, 2021. I hired a private investigator to find out more about this Isabel Silver, who appears in the documents as my half-sister. Born in 1998, 2 years after me, in a town in rural Virginia. Raised by a woman named Bernadette Silver, who according to the records was our maternal grandmother. Our mother, Helena Silver, disappeared from the records after my birth. The investigator suspects she assumed a new identity. Isabel's hands began to tremble. Bernadette was my grandmother's name. April 10th, 2021. The investigator discovered more things. Helena Silver was involved with a very powerful man, married, who kept her as a mistress. When she first got pregnant with me, he took her to Italy so the child would be born far from the USA, far from the eyes of society. She lived there for 2 years, until she discovered she was pregnant again. This time the man refused to support 2 children. He said one bastard daughter was enough. Isabel had to stop reading because tears were blurring her vision. This can't be true. April 17th, 2021. Helena returned to the USA to have the second child, but the powerful man didn't want her anymore. She was forced to leave the child with her mother and disappear. I stayed in Italy, being raised as the daughter of a rich family who was paid to adopt me. My sister Isabel stayed in the USA, being raised by our grandmother, believing she was an orphan. Who was he? Isabel managed to ask between sobs. Who was the powerful man? Nathan turned a few pages of the diary. It's here. May 2nd, 2021. I discovered the name of our biological father, Victor Blackwell, the construction magnate, owner of half the luxury buildings in Manhattan and Miami. Married for 40 years to the same woman, 3 legitimate children, grandchildren, impeccable reputation, and 2 bastard daughters that he made sure to erase from his own history. The world stopped. Isabel looked at Nathan with an expression of total horror. Blackwell, you are son of Victor Blackwell, which technically makes us half-siblings. Nathan ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of extreme stress. Sophia discovered this 2 weeks before she died. Isabel stood up from the chair so quickly that it fell backward. This is impossible. This is sick. I worked for you. We never did anything, Isabel. And now you understand. Why? From the first moment I saw you, there was something familiar about you. Something that attracted me, but that I couldn't identify. When Sophia started appearing in my dreams talking about you, I knew I had to investigate. You knew? Isabel turned to face him, her eyes flaming with anger. You knew who I was when you offered me the job. I suspected, but I wasn't sure until I confirmed the dates, the places, the names. I needed to have you close by to understand the truth. So you brought me here under false pretenses, made me think I was being hired for my merits, when in fact I was just part of some sick investigation about your dead ex-fiancé. Nathan stood up too, trying to approach, but Isabel backed away. It wasn't like that, Isabel. Yes, I wanted to discover the truth about our connection, but what I feel for you... What you feel for me? Isabel laughed, but it was a hysterical laugh without humor. We're siblings, Nathan. Half siblings, but still siblings. Anything you feel is wrong, sick. What I feel for you has nothing to do with blood or family, Nathan shouted, and it was the first time she saw him completely lose control. I fell in love with you before I knew who you were. I fell in love with the woman who cleans rooms as if she were creating art, who refuses expensive wine, but drinks champagne as if it were sacred water, who looks at me as if she could see through all my lies. The silence that followed was charged with electrical tension. Isabel looked at Nathan as if seeing him for the first time, processing both the confession of love and the revelation of the family connection. Keep reading the diary, Nathan finally said, his voice returning to a controlled tone. There are more things you need to know. Isabel hesitated, but curiosity overcame shock. She straightened the chair and sat down again, taking the diary with trembling hands. May 15th, 2021. I confronted Nathan today about our father. I didn't tell him that I know about Isabel, but I asked if he knew that Victor had had extramarital affairs. He was very disturbed. He said he had always suspected, but that he never wanted to investigate because he knew he would discover things. That would hurt him. Poor Nathan. He still doesn't know that he fell in love with his own half-sister. She knew, Isabel murmured. Sophia knew about us too. May 20th, 2021. I'm pregnant. The test was positive today. It's Nathan's, I'm sure. But how can I have a child with him knowing we're half-siblings? How can I tell him the truth now? He'll be devastated. And what if he finds out about Isabel? What if he tries to find her? Isabel stopped reading again. She was pregnant. With your child, with Nathan, her half-brother. May 25, 2021. I can't sleep anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I see the face of the baby growing inside me. And it has Nathan's eyes, but it also has something of Victor. It's as if all generations of Blackwell men were repeating in miniature inside my belly. This is a curse. This family is a curse. June 2021. I made a decision. I'm going to tell Nathan everything about our father, about Isabel, about the moral impossibility of us continuing together. He deserves to know the truth before we get married. And then I'll leave. Far away. Maybe to Canada. Start a new life with the baby, away from all this confusion. But she never got to tell, Nathan said, when Isabel stopped reading. 3 days after that entry, she was dead. She killed herself because she discovered you were siblings. Read the last entry. Isabel turned to the final page of the diary. The handwriting was shakier, as if Sophia had been writing in a hurry or under extreme stress. June 5th, 2021. Someone knows. I received a call today from a man who knew about Victor, about me and Nathan, about Isabel. He said that if I told the truth to Nathan, he would make sure Isabel would permanently disappear. He said some secrets are worth lives, and that an orphan girl in rural Virginia wouldn't be missed by anyone. I can't let them hurt my sister because of my mistakes. I can't. Isabel's blood froze. Someone was blackmailing her? It seems so, and the threat was against you. But who else knew about our family connection? Nathan closed the diary and looked at her with a somber expression. That's the million-dollar question, and the answer may be closer than we imagine. At that moment, the penthouse phone rang. Nathan answered, and Isabel could hear the tense voice of someone on the other end of the line. Yes, he's here. What do you mean, on the way? No, I'm not expecting anyone. How long? Nathan hung up the phone and looked at Isabel with concern. My father is coming up. Victor Blackwell is coming here now. Apparently, the reception said he arrived 5 minutes ago and is on his way to the penthouse. Isabel felt panic take over her body. I can't be here when he arrives. I can't meet our father like this. Isabel, calm down. No! She stood up again, this time determined. I need to process all this. I need to think. I need to... The penthouse doorbell rang. Nathan and Isabel looked at each other. There was something deeply wrong with that unexpected visit. Victor Blackwell wasn't the type of man who made surprise visits. He was the type of man who scheduled meetings 3 weeks in advance and never deviated from his agenda. Go to the bedroom, Nathan whispered. Close the door. Don't come out until I call you. But Isabel didn't move. Something inside her, a combination of morbid curiosity and need for answers, kept her glued to the spot. Isabel, please. The doorbell rang again, this time more, insistently. I want to stay, she finally said. I need to see him. I need to look into the eyes of the man who abandoned my mother and see who he really is. Nathan hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Then stay behind that wall. Listen, but don't let him see you until we know what he wants. Isabel positioned herself where Nathan had indicated, with a partial view of the room but hidden from the sight of anyone who entered through the main door. Nathan went to the door and opened it. Victor Blackwell entered the penthouse like an emperor entering his palace. At 72, he still maintained the erect posture and imposing bearing that had made him a legend in the American business world. Perfectly combed grey hair, impeccable Italian suit, leather shoes that probably cost more than a popular car. But there was something different about him. Dire tension around the eyes, a stiffness in the shoulders that suggested this was not a social visit. "Nathan," Victor said, his voice carrying that natural authority that came from decades of commanding people. "We need to talk." "Father." "What?" Sounds to an unpleasant surprise. Victor ignored the provocation and walked to the window, looking at the view of the city as if it belonged to him. "I heard you're working again. Hired a personal assistant." "My professional decisions haven't been your concern for 3 years. Yes, they are, when those decisions can affect the entire family." Victor turned to face Nathan, and Isabel could see his eyes for the first time. They were exactly like Nathan's, the same blue-gray tone, the same intensity. It was disturbing to recognize family traits in a man she was meeting as her biological father. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about Isabel Hayes." Her name echoed through the room like a gunshot. Isabel felt the blood drain from her face. Nathan remained motionless, but Isabel could see the tension growing in his shoulders. "How do you know that name?" "I know many things, Nathan, including that you're playing with fire in a way that could destroy everything our family has built over decades." "Our family," Nathan repeated, and there was venom in his voice. "Are you referring to the family that includes the 2 bastard daughters you abandoned, or just the official family that appears in Society magazine photos?" Victor remained motionless for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, more dangerous. "So you know." "I know everything. About Helena Silva, about Sophia, about Isabel, about how you destroyed a woman's life and then erased the very existence of the daughters you had with her." "I didn't destroy anyone's life. Helena knew exactly what kind of relationship we were having, and I took good care of both girls." "Took good care?" Nathan laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. "You paid an Italian family to raise Sophia as an adopted daughter and abandoned Isabel with an elderly grandmother in rural Virginia. That's taking good care? I ensured that both had food, education, a roof over their heads. Sophia had opportunities she would never have had if she had stayed in the USA as a bastard daughter. And Isabel? Isabel what?" Nathan took a threatening step toward his father. "Isabel grew up believing she was an orphan, working since adolescence to survive, never knowing she had a father who could have given her all the opportunities in the world. And look how she developed. A strong, independent woman who doesn't depend on anyone. If I had interfered in her life, she would be just another pampered and useless heiress." The coldness with which Victor spoke about her made Isabel feel nauseous. For him, she wasn't a daughter, but a social project that had worked out by chance. "Why are you here, Father? What do you really want?" Victor walked to the bar and served himself a whiskey without asking permission. "I'm here because I heard that you discovered the truth about your relationship with Isabel, and I'm here to ensure that this truth doesn't leave this room." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm being practical. If the press discovers that the heir to the Blackwell Empire became romantically involved with his own half-sister, our reputation will be destroyed. Our stocks will fall, our businesses will be affected, our family will be the target of scandal and ridicule. I care very little about our reputation. But you should care about Isabel's safety." The implicit threat made Nathan stiffen. "Explain that." "There are very powerful people who have an interest in keeping certain secrets buried. People who won't hesitate to remove obstacles that threaten their investments in our company." "Are you saying they'll hurt Isabel if I don't keep silent?" "I'm saying accidents happen, especially to young women who ask too many questions about the past." The implication was clear and terrifying. Isabel understood at that moment that Sophia's death might not have been suicide. It could have been a way to silence someone who knew too much. "It was you," Nathan said, his voice low and dangerous. "You had Sophia killed." "I didn't have anyone killed. Sophia killed herself because she couldn't handle the truth about you two. But if she had tried to make that truth public, you would have ordered her death." Victor finished his whiskey, and put the empty glass on the table. I protect my family, Nathan. I always have. And I'll continue to protect it, even if that means protecting my family from itself. Get out of here. I'll leave. But first, I want you to understand something. Isabel can stay in New York, can even continue working for you, if that's necessary for your emotional stability. But she can never know who she really is, and you two can never become closer than you already are. And if I refuse to accept your conditions? Victor walked to the door, but before leaving, he turned to give Nathan one last look. Then, you'll wake up one morning and discover that your personal assistant suffered a terrible accident, a robbery gone wrong, perhaps, or a traffic accident. Things like that happen every day in New York City. The door closed behind Victor Blackwell, leaving a silence charged with tension and terror. Isabel emerged from her hiding place with trembling legs. Nathan had his back to her, his hands resting on the table, his head down as if the weight of the world had just fallen on his shoulders. "Now I understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now I understand why Sophia killed herself. It wasn't just because she discovered you were siblings. It was because she realized she was trapped in a web of lies and threats from which she could never escape." Nathan turned to face her, and she saw tears in his eyes for the first time. "Isabel, I swear I never wanted you to get involved in this. When I offered you the job, I just wanted to understand our connection. I never imagined that our family, that my father, that your father would be capable of killing to protect secrets." Isabel completed the sentence. "But now we know, and that changes everything. What do you want to do?" Isabel looked at Sophia's diary, still open on the table, and then at Nathan, the man she had begun to love without knowing he was her half-brother, the man who was now threatened by the same violence that had destroyed Sophia. "I want to find out who really killed Sophia," she said, her voice becoming firmer with each word. "And I want to make sure they pay for what they did. That's too dangerous. Sophia died trying to protect us. The least we can do is ensure that her death wasn't in vain." Isabel approached Nathan and took his hands in hers. "It doesn't matter what our biological connection is. What matters is that we're in this together now, and together we'll discover the truth." Nathan squeezed her hands, and in that touch, Isabel felt something that went beyond romantic attraction or family connection. It was a partnership, an alliance forged in the fire of adversity. "So," he said, "where do we start?" Isabel smiled, and for the first time since learning the truth about her identity, she felt in control of her own life. "We start by finding out who else knew about the secret, who else had an interest in keeping Sophia silent." And then, she looked toward the door through which Victor had left. "We discover exactly how far our family is willing to go, to silence us too." In the hours that followed Victor Blackwell's threatening visit, Nathan and Isabel transformed into improvised detectives, searching every page of Sophia's diary for clues that could reveal the identity of the mysterious man who had blackmailed her. Penthouse 2501 transformed into an operations center, with documents spread across all surfaces, laptops open showing internet search results, and an improvised board where they mapped connections and suspects. Isabel had found something disturbing in the last pages of the diary. Sophia mentioned an envelope she had received with compromising photos, not just of her and Nathan, but also of other people in intimate situations. Someone was collecting evidence of scandalous relationships involving the Blackwell family. "Look at this," Isabel said, pointing to a specific diary entry. 3 days before she died, Sophia writes about receiving photos of you with other women. But not just any woman, specifically with Valentina Moretti." Nathan looked up from the documents he was analyzing. "Valentina? But we went out a few times, but there was never anything serious between us." "Who is Valentina Moretti?" "Daughter of Giuseppe Moretti, one of the largest Italian investors in our company. They control about 20% of the shares of Blackwell Enterprises." Nathan ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that Isabel had already learned to recognize as a sign of extreme stress. "If compromising photos of me and Valentina reached Giuseppe's hands, It would be the end of the most important commercial partnership we have in Europe. So whoever was blackmailing Sophia had access to very intimate information about your personal life and your business. Someone very close, Nathan murmured, and Isabel saw a somber expression pass over his face. Someone with access to my apartments, my schedule, my relationships. At that moment, Nathan's cell phone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. "It's Dolores," he said, "the hotel supervisor." Isabel felt a shiver of premonition. "Why would she be calling you?" Nathan answered the call and put it on speakerphone, so Isabel could hear. "Mr. Blackwell." Dolores's tense voice echoed through the room. "I need to speak with Isabel urgently. It's about her apartment." "What apartment?" Nathan asked. "Her old apartment, sir. In Brooklyn. There was a fire this morning. Everything was destroyed." Isabel felt her blood freeze. "A fire? How?" "The police are investigating, but it seems it was arson. Someone broke down the door, ransacked everything, and then set it on fire." Dolores's voice trembled. "Isabel, dear, are you okay? You weren't there, were you?" "No, I'm safe." "Thank God. But there's one more thing. Your neighbor, Mrs. Connolly, said she saw well-dressed men lurking around the building in the last few days, asking questions about you, wanting to know your routine where you worked now." Nathan and Isabel looked at each other. Victor's threats were materializing more quickly than they expected. "Dolores," Nathan said, taking control of the conversation, "thank you for calling. Keep this confidential for now, okay? And if anyone else asks questions about Isabel, don't provide any information." "Of course, sir. Just be careful, okay? There's something very strange going on." After Nathan hung up, the silence in the penthouse was charged with tension. Isabel sat heavily in an armchair, processing the fact that her previous life had been literally incinerated. "They burned everything," she murmured. "My books, my notebook of poems, the few photos I had of my grandmother. Everything." Nathan knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Isabel, I'm sorry, but this confirms that we're on the right track. Someone is desperate to erase any trace of your previous life, or to send me a message, show that they can reach any place where I am. I won't let anything happen to you." Isabel looked into Nathan's eyes, and for a moment completely forgot that they were half-siblings. She saw only the man who had become her confidant, her protector, her anchor amid the chaos. The fact that they shared blood seemed irrelevant in the face of the emotional connection that had developed between them. "Nathan," she said softly, "what's happening between us? This closeness, this attraction, is it real or is it just a response to the danger we're facing together?" Nathan hesitated for a long moment before answering. "I don't know. I only know that when I look at you, I don't see a sister. I see the woman I fell in love with even before knowing who you really were. But now we know who we are, and that changes everything. Does it? Or does it just make everything more complicated?" Before Isabel could answer, the penthouse landline rang again. Nathan answered, but this time kept the phone to his ear. "Hello?" "Yes, I accept the call." He looked at Isabel with a worried expression. "It's a collect call from a prison in Manhattan." Isabel felt a knot in her stomach. Who could be calling from a prison? "Nathan Blackwell," he said into the phone. "Who's speaking?" "What?" "That's impossible. She's been dead for 3 years." Nathan went pale. "No, I won't hang up. Where did you get this number?" "All right, I'm listening." Nathan put the call on speakerphone, and a female voice, weak but unmistakably familiar, echoed through the room. "Nathan, my love, it's me, it's Sophia." Isabel felt as if the world had stopped spinning. It was impossible. Sophia Ricci was dead. She had seen the photos of the funeral, had read the articles about the suicide. "This is some kind of sick joke," Nathan said, but his voice trembled. "It's not a joke, Nathan. It's me. I know it's hard to believe, but I didn't die. It was all staged." "Prove it," Nathan said, and Isabel could see that he was fighting between hope and despair. "You have a scar on your chest on the left side from when you fell off your bike at 8 years old. You told me you always lied to your parents, saying you had fallen while playing football because you thought riding a bike wasn't masculine enough." Nathan sat down heavily. It was information that only someone very close to him could know. "Sophia," he whispered. "How? Why?" "I can't explain much over the phone. This place isn't safe for long conversations. But Nathan, you need to know that I discovered who was really behind the threats, and it's not who you think." "Then tell me." "Not over the phone. You need to come here, but Nathan, you can't come alone." "What do you mean?" "Bring Isabel. She needs to hear this too." The silence that followed was loaded with terrifying implications. How did Sophia know about Isabel? How did she know they were together? "How do you know about Isabel?" Nathan asked. "Because all of this was always about her. What happened to me was just a side effect." Sophia's voice was getting weaker, as if she were running out of time. "Nathan, listen carefully. Victor isn't the only enemy. There's someone much closer to you who wants Isabel dead, someone you trust." The call was cut off. Nathan and Isabel remained in absolute silence for several minutes, processing what they had just heard. If Sophia was really alive, this changed everything. It meant that someone had orchestrated a fake suicide, that there were people with enough power to falsify official documents, bribe medical examiners, and deceive the entire world. "Do you believe it was really her?" Isabel finally asked. "The information about the scar, only Sophia knew about that. And the voice—" Nathan shook his head. "It sounds like her, but 3 years older, more tired." "If she's alive, why did they fake her death?" "To protect her from whoever was making the threats, or to protect me." "Thought?" Nathan looked at Isabel with a disturbed expression. "To protect you. She said it was always about me. What does that mean?" "I don't know, but we're going to find out." Nathan stood up and began pacing the room. "We're going to Manhattan. Today." "Nathan, this could be a trap. If Sophia is really alive, who guarantees that she's not working with whoever is threatening us?" "It's a risk I need to take. If there's a chance, no matter how small, that she has answers that can protect you, I have to investigate." Isabel stood up too. "Then let's go together." "No, it's too dangerous." "Nathan," Isabel approached him, placing her hands on his chest. "I'm not going to stay here waiting while you risk yourself for my sake. We're in this together, remember?" Nathan looked down at her hands on his chest, and Isabel saw something transform in his eyes. It was desire, but it was also desperation. It was love, but it was also fear. "Isabel," he said, his voice hoarse, "do you realize what you're doing to me?" "What am I doing?" "Making me forget why I can't touch you." Isabel felt her own heart accelerate. She was so close to him that she could feel the heat of his body, the aroma of his cologne mixed with something more primal, more masculine. "Maybe," she whispered. "Some rules are made to be broken." Nathan held her wrists, but didn't push her away. "We're siblings, Isabel. Half-siblings raised separately, without any family emotional connection." She leaned closer. "And what if this is all we have? If tomorrow we're dead or separated forever, won't we at least know what it would have been like?" "This is madness. Our entire situation is madness." Nathan visibly struggled between reason and desire. Isabel could see the war happening in his eyes, and something inside her, a primitive part that didn't care about social conventions or genetic connections, wanted desire to win. "If I kiss you now," Nathan murmured, "I won't be able to stop." "At just a kiss. Who said I want you to stop?" Those were the words that broke Nathan's last resistance. He pulled her against his body and kissed her with a desperate passion, as if trying to consume her entire essence in a single moment. Isabel responded with equal intensity, pouring into the kiss all the frustration, fear, desire, and confusion of recent days. Nathan's hands buried themselves in her hair, while her hands explored the contours of his chest through his shirt. It was wrong on so many levels, but it felt more right than anything she had ever experienced in life. When they finally separated to breathe, both were panting and trembling. "This doesn't solve anything," Nathan said, resting his forehead on hers. "No, but at least now we know." "Know what?" that what we feel for each other is greater than any social convention or biological connection. Nathan held her tighter, as if she might disappear at any moment. Isabel, I can't promise that we'll get out of this alive, but I can promise that I'll fight for you until my last breath. And I'll fight for you too. They were interrupted by the sound of Nathan's cell phone ringing again. This time the screen showed unknown number. Nathan answered, cautiously. Hello? Mr. Blackwell, a male voice said on the other end of the line. I hope you enjoyed our little demonstration at Miss Hayes's apartment. Who are you? Someone who has your best interests in mind. I have a proposal to make. I'm not interested in proposals. You should be, because this proposal could save the life of the woman you love. Nathan looked at Isabel, who could clearly hear the conversation. I'm listening. Simple. You hand over Isabel Hayes to us without resistance, and I guarantee she'll have a quick and painless death. If you refuse or try to run, she'll die in a much more creative way. I'll never hand Isabel over to you. I imagined you'd say that. That's why I prepared a small incentive. The man paused, and when he spoke again, there was another voice in the background, a female voice screaming in pain. No! The voice screamed. Nathan, don't believe them! They'll kill you both anyway! It was Sophia, the real Sophia, and she was being tortured. You have 48 hours to decide, the man continued, ignoring the screams. Hand over the girl or both die, and Mr. Blackwell, don't try to be clever. We know where you are. We know every move you make. There's nowhere to hide. The call was cut off. Nathan threw the phone against the wall, where it shattered into several pieces. 48 hours, Isabel said, surprisingly calm. We'll leave the country. Today. I have contacts who can get us fake passports. Nathan, stop, think with me. Isabel went to the window and looked at the city below. They have Sophia. If we run, she dies. If we stay, you die. Maybe. Or maybe we'll find a third option. Nathan approached her. What third option? Isabel turned to face him, and Nathan saw something new in her eyes. A cold, calculating determination that he had never seen before. We find out who's behind all this, and then we eliminate them before they eliminate us. Isabel, you're not an assassin. No, but they killed my biological mother, or at least destroyed her life. They faked Sophia's death. They burned my home. They're torturing an innocent woman. Isabel picked up Sophia's diary from the table. And now they're trying to use us against each other. How will we find them in 48 hours? We won't find them. We'll make them come to us. Isabel opened the diary to a specific page. Sophia writes here about a party, an annual party, that your father organizes for international investors. It always happens in the same place on the same date. Nathan looked at the page. The Blackwell Enterprises Gala Ball. It's tomorrow night. All the suspects will be there. Victor, the Italian investors, the company executives, all those who would have an interest in keeping secrets buried. You want to use the party as a trap? Exactly. We show up there together publicly, forcing the hand of whoever is behind the threats. They'll have to act, and when they do, we'll be ready. Nathan shook his head. It's too risky. Riskier than running like criminals for the rest of our lives. Riskier than letting Sophia die at the hands of torturers. Nathan was silent for a long moment, considering the options. Finally, he nodded. All right, we'll go to the party, but we won't go unarmed. What do you mean? Nathan opened one of the penthouse cabinets and removed a small gun. I've had her concealed carry permit for years. I never thought I'd need to use it, but do you know how to shoot? My father taught me when I was a teenager, ironically. Nathan checked if the gun was loaded. And you? Isabel took the gun from his hands, checked the magazine with practical and efficient movements, and returned it to him. My grandmother taught me, said a woman alone in the countryside should always know how to defend herself. Nathan looked at her with a new expression of respect. You continue to surprise me. Well, Isabel smiled, but it was a cold smile without humor. You haven't seen anything yet. They spent the rest of the day planning every detail of the trap they would set at the party. Nathan used his contacts to ensure they would have access to the most exclusive sectors of the event, where only the most important guests could circulate. Isabel studied the layouts of the hotel where the party would be held, identifying escape routes and strategic points. When night fell, over New York, they were ready, or at least as ready as possible to face invisible enemies in a battle where the rules weren't yet clear. "Tomorrow night," Nathan said, holding Isabel's hands as they looked at the city below. "All this ends. One way or another." Isabel agreed. "If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. But if it does," Isabel turned to face him, "if something goes wrong, I want you to know that I don't regret anything. Not accepting to work for you, not discovering the truth about my family, not falling in love with you despite everything." Nathan kissed her again, but this time the kiss was soft, tender, full of unspoken promises and unvoiced goodbyes. When they separated, both knew that the next night would change their lives forever. The question was, would they still be alive to see the following dawn? The Blackwell Enterprises Gala happened annually at the Plaza Hotel, transforming the iconic Golden Ballroom into a stage of ostentation where the American business elite and international visitors gathered to close billion-dollar deals between French champagne and caviar canapes. On that Saturday night, as Isabel prepared for what could be her last public appearance, she knew she was about to enter an arena where her life would be the final prize in a deadly game. Nathan had provided a dress for her that was a work of art in itself. An exclusive model from his own brand, in emerald green silk that embraced her curves with mathematical perfection, with a discreet but elegant neckline and a side slit that revealed her legs when she walked. The shoes were Louboutin, with a red sole that contrasted with the deep green of the dress, and the jewelry was borrowed from one of Nathan's private collections, diamonds that shone like small stars against her skin. When she emerged from the bedroom, Nathan stopped breathing. Dressed in an Armani tuxedo made to measure, he himself was the personification of masculine elegance, but when he saw Isabel transformed into that glamorous version of herself, he realized that she wasn't just his personal assistant or his half-sister or even the woman he had fallen in love with. She was a force of nature. "You're stunning," he said, his voice loaded with an emotion that went far beyond simple physical attraction. "You don't look so bad yourself," Isabel replied, adjusting his bow tie with intimate movements that spoke of a familiarity that transcended the time they had known each other. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Nathan asked, holding her hands. "We can still run. I have a private jet at LaGuardia. In 2 hours we could be flying anywhere in the world." Isabel looked into his eyes and saw the fear, but also saw determination. "Nathan, if we run today, we'll spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. Sophia will die at their hands, and we'll never know who really killed our mother." "Our mother," Nathan repeated, and there was something strange in the way he said those words. "Do you realize how natural it sounds when you say it like that?" "I do. And I also realize that even being half-siblings, what I feel for you hasn't diminished one bit." Nathan pulled her closer, pressing his forehead against hers. "Isabel, after today, if we survive, we need to talk seriously about our future, about what it means to love someone who shares your blood, but not your history. We'll survive," she said with a conviction that surprised them both, "and then we'll figure out how two half-siblings who love each other can build a life together, even if the whole world says it's impossible." The limousine that took them to the hotel was armored, a precaution Nathan had taken after the threats of the day before. During the journey through the streets of New York, they reviewed the plan one last time. They would enter the party separately. Nathan first, so as not to raise immediate suspicion. Isabel would arrive 15 minutes later as his official escort for the night. They would circulate around the party, observing, identifying possible threats, forcing any hidden enemy to reveal themselves. "Remember," Nathan said when the limousine stopped in front of the hotel, "don't leave my sight. If something goes wrong, if you sense any danger, come to me immediately." "And if you're the one in danger?" Nathan smiled, but it was a tense smile. Then improvise. You're very good at that. The golden ballroom of the plaza was transformed into a scene from a dark fairy tale. Baccarat crystal chandeliers illuminated the environment with a golden light that made the women's diamonds shine like personal constellations. Men in tuxedos and women in haute couture dresses circulated among tables decorated with rare orchids, while waiters served Dom Perignon champagne and 15-year-old whiskey as if they were water. When Nathan entered the ballroom, there was a perceptible change in the atmosphere. Conversations momentarily interrupted, heads turned, whispers began to circulate. Nathan Blackwell was back in the world, and everyone wanted to know why. Victor Blackwell saw him immediately and walked in his direction with the rigid posture of a general preparing for a battle. He wore an impeccable tuxedo and carried that aura of power he had cultivated for decades, but Isabel, observing from a strategic point near the entrance, could see tension around his eyes. "Nathan," Victor said when he approached, his voice low but loaded with warning. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight." "I thought it was time to return to the world of the living," Nathan replied, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "After all, business must continue, right?" "Where is she?" "Who?" "Don't play with me, Nathan. Where is Isabel?" "Arriving," Nathan said simply, and at that moment, as if it were a carefully orchestrated theatrical entrance, Isabel appeared at the top of the marble staircase that led to the ballroom. The effect was electric. Isabel had transformed from an invisible hotel employee into a goddess of high society, and all those present seemed to have simultaneously realized that a new player had entered the board. She descended the staircase with the grace of a ballerina and the confidence of a queen, her eyes scanning the ballroom until they found Nathan. When their gazes met across the crowded ballroom, it was as if an electric current had run through the environment. Nathan headed toward her, completely ignoring Victor's presence, and offered his arm when she reached the bottom of the staircase. "My lady," he said with playful formality. "Gentlemen," she responded, accepting his arm. Together they entered the ballroom like a power couple, and Isabel could feel the curious, envious, and speculative looks that followed them. But there was something more. There were calculating, predatory looks that made her feel like a gazelle in the middle of a group of lions. "Giuseppe Moretti is over there," Nathan murmured in her ear, discreetly indicating a tall man with grey hair who was talking with a group of businessmen near the bar. "Valentina's father, Italian investor. If there's anyone here who would have reasons to blackmail us, it would be him." But when Isabel looked at Giuseppe Moretti, she didn't see a conspirator. She saw an older man, clearly worried about something, who looked at Nathan with an expression that seemed more of relief than threat. "It's not him," she said instinctively. "How can you be sure?" "Female intuition, or maybe," she squeezed his arm, "sister's intuition." It was at that moment that Isabel saw someone who made her blood freeze. In the farthest corner of the ballroom, animatedly talking with a group of young executives, was a woman she immediately recognized, although she had never seen her personally in this context. Dolores, the hotel supervisor. But she wasn't dressed as an employee. She was wearing a haute couture dress, expensive jewelry, and was behaving as if she belonged to that world of luxury and power. "Nathan," Isabel whispered urgently, "Dolores is here." "Who?" "My ex-supervisor from the hotel, but look how she's dressed. Look how she's behaving. She's not a simple hotel employee." Nathan followed her gaze and frowned. "You're right. That dress cost more than $100,000. And those diamonds." He stopped. "Wait, I know her." "What do you mean?" "That's not Dolores. That's Dolores Santana, one of the executives of our company. She handles international operations." Isabel's world began to crumble and rebuild simultaneously. Dolores wasn't a simple hotel supervisor. She was a high-level executive of Blackwell, planted at the hotel to watch, to control, to manipulate. "How long has she worked at the hotel?" Nathan asked. 3 years, Isabel responded, and both reached the same conclusion at the same time. "Since Sophia died. She was observing you, from the beginning." At that moment, Dolores looked in their direction, and when her eyes met, Isabel's, she smiled, but it wasn't the maternal and protective smile that Isabel remembered. It was the cold smile of a predator who had just located its prey. Dolores approached them with calculated steps, still smiling that smile that now seemed sinister. "Isabel, dear," she said when she got close enough to be heard. "What a wonderful transformation. Who would have thought that our little employee would become the star of the party?" "Dolores," Nathan said, his voice cold as ice, "what a surprise to see you here." "It shouldn't be a surprise, Nathan. After all, I've been vice president of international operations for your company for 5 years. Why were you working at the hotel?" Isabel asked directly. "Oh, my dear innocent girl, I wasn't working at the hotel. I was taking care of you." Dolores came closer, lowering her voice so only they could hear. "Victor hired me to watch over you after we discovered your existence, to ensure that you never knew who you really were." "You knew about me from the beginning?" "From before the beginning. I knew about you even before you were born." Dolores laughed softly. "Your mother, Helena, was my best friend. We grew up together in rural Virginia. When she got involved with Victor, I warned her that nothing good would come of it, and I was right." Nathan stepped forward, positioning himself slightly between Dolores and Isabel. "What did you do to Helena?" "I didn't do anything to Helena. Helena killed herself when you were 2 years old, Isabel. She couldn't live with the guilt of having abandoned 2 daughters." The revelation hit Isabel like a punch to the stomach. "My grandmother told me she had disappeared." "Your grandmother was trying to protect you from the truth. Helena took an overdose of sleeping pills, just like Sophia supposedly did years later. The difference is that Helena's death was real." "And you decided to use that information to blackmail my father?" Nathan asked. "Not to blackmail, to control." Dolores looked around the ballroom, checking if anyone was paying attention to their conversation. Victor was becoming careless. He was starting to develop a guilty conscience about the daughters he had abandoned, especially after Sophia became a famous model. He was thinking about seeking them out, trying to remedy the mistakes of the past. "And you couldn't allow that." "I had invested too much in the company to let sentimentality ruin everything. If the truth about Victor's bastard daughters became public, our stocks would fall, our international investors would withdraw, everything we had built would be destroyed." Isabel finally understood. "So you orchestrated Sophia's fake death to scare Victor?" Sophia was becoming a problem. She was asking too many questions, hiring private investigators, threatening to expose the truth. I offered her an alternative: disappear voluntarily with a new identity and enough money to live comfortably forever, or face the consequences of her actions. "But she didn't accept," Nathan said. "Oh, she accepted, initially. The suicide was staged, the documents were falsified, the world believed she was dead. But then—" Dolores sighed as if she were talking about a mischievous pet. "Then she started having crises of conscience, said she couldn't live knowing you were suffering." Nathan wanted to come back, wanted to tell the truth. "So you kept her prisoner." "I kept her safe, in a very discreet private clinic where she receives the best medical and psychiatric care." "You mean she's being drugged and kept against her will?" Isabel said, and there was venom in her voice. "I mean she's being protected from herself, and from you two." Nathan stepped forward again, and now he was clearly threatening Dolores. "Where is she?" "In a safe place, and if you two are smart, she'll remain there." "I don't understand why you're telling us all this," Isabel said. "If you wanted to keep it secret, why reveal the truth now?" Dolores smiled again, and this time the smile was genuinely frightening. "Because, my dear, I'm not revealing the truth. I'm offering one last opportunity for negotiation." "What kind of negotiation?" "Simple. You two disappear, leave the country tonight, assume new identities, never return to the USA. In exchange, Sophia lives. You live. Everyone lives happily ever after, just in very, very distant places from each other. And if we refuse? Then tomorrow morning the newspapers will report a terrible tragedy. Fashion magnate Nathan Blackwell and his young assistant died in a car accident on the road to the airport. Apparently they were running away together after a romantic scandal that would be revealed in the press." Isabel felt the fear, but also felt something stronger: anger. Anger at having been manipulated throughout her entire life. Anger that Sophia had been kidnapped and drugged. Anger that Helena had been driven to suicide. Anger at all the unnecessary pain that had been caused to protect a company's reputation. "There's a third option," she said calmly. "Which would be, we tell the truth to everyone tonight." Dolores laughed as if Isabel had told a joke. "And who will believe you? Two people in a clearly inappropriate romantic situation making accusations against a respected executive. Without evidence, without proof." "We have proof," Nathan said. "Do you? What proof?" It was then that Isabel realized Dolores had made a mistake. A fatal mistake. "We have this conversation," Isabel said, pointing discreetly to the diamond brooch she was wearing on her dress. "Nathan, do you remember mentioning that some of the brooches in your private collection have integrated security devices?" Nathan smiled slowly. "Security devices that include high-definition audio and video. Recorders." Dolores's expression instantly changed from confidence to panic. "You can't." "We can. And we will." Isabel looked around the ballroom. "Nathan, I think it's time to make an announcement." Nathan took her hand and led her to the small platform where musicians normally played during the parties. He signaled for the DJ to stop the music and took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice echoed through the ballroom, causing all conversations to immediately stop. "Oh, I apologize for interrupting the party, but I have some important announcements to make." The ballroom fell into total silence, with all those present looking at Nathan and Isabel on the platform. "First," Nathan continued, "I'd like to officially introduce to all of you Isabel Hayes Blackwell, my half-sister and the woman I love." A shocked murmur ran through the ballroom. Victor Blackwell turned as pale as paper. "Second," Isabel took the microphone, "we'd like to announce that Sophia Ricci's death 3 years ago was staged, that she's being held prisoner in a psychiatric clinic against her will, and that we have evidence that all this was orchestrated by Dolores Santana to protect the financial interests of Blackwell Enterprises." The ballroom exploded in shocked conversations. Dolores tried to leave discreetly, but discovered that the doors were blocked by security guards that Nathan had secretly hired. "Third," Nathan spoke again, "we're offering a reward of $10 million for any information that leads to the safe location and rescue of Sophia Ricci. And fourth," Isabel said, looking directly at Dolores, "anyone who has information about the death of Helena Silva, which occurred 23 years ago in rural Virginia, can also come forward to receive a reward and police protection." It was at that moment that something unexpected happened. Giuseppe Moretti approached the platform and asked for the microphone. "May I speak?" he asked in English with an Italian accent. Nathan handed him the microphone hesitantly. "I know where Sophia is," Giuseppe said, his voice loaded with emotion. "And I know because I know that Dolores Santana has been my partner in many businesses over the years, including the business of keeping Sophia Ricci sedated and imprisoned." The ballroom fell into absolute silence again. "Sophia is in a private clinic in the Hamptons. I have the exact address, and I have documents that prove that Dolores has been paying for her internment for 3 years. Why are you revealing this now?" Nathan asked. "Because," Giuseppe looked at Dolores with contempt, "I thought I was helping to protect the reputation of the company where I invested millions. But when I discovered earlier today that Dolores was planning to kill you both, I realized I had associated myself with a murderer." Dolores finally tried to run, but was quickly restrained by the security guards. As she was taken out of the ballroom, shouting threats and accusations, Nathan and Isabel descended from the platform hand in hand. "Let's go find Sophia," Nathan said. "Now. Now." The trip to the Hamptons took 2 hours, with a police escort that Giuseppe had helped organize. The clinic was a discreet building hidden among the mansions, which from the outside looked more like a luxury resort than a medical prison. When they found Sophia, she was conscious but clearly under the effect of medications. She was thinner than Nathan remembered, paler, but her eyes still shone with intelligence when she saw them. "Nathan," she whispered when he knelt beside her bed, "you found Isabel." "I found her. And you were right. It was always about her." Sophia looked at Isabel with tears in her eyes. "Sister," she said simply. "Sister," Isabel responded, holding Sophia's hand. "Now you need to decide what you're going to do," Sophia said, looking between Nathan and Isabel. "Because I'll be fine. I'll recover. I'll rebuild my life. But you two have a much more complicated decision to make." 3 months later, Nathan and Isabel were on a private beach in the Maldives, watching the sunset paint the ocean in golden and rosy tones. Dolores Santana was awaiting trial for kidnapping, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to commit murder. Victor Blackwell had resigned from all his positions in the company and moved to a farm in the countryside, saying he wanted to spend the rest of his life trying to make peace with the daughters he had abandoned. Sophia was recovering at a rehabilitation clinic in Switzerland, free of the drugs that had clouded her mind for 3 years. "So," Isabel said, lying on the sand next to Nathan, "officially we're half-siblings, unofficially we're lovers, and publicly we're the most talked-about scandal of the year. Does it bother you?" Nathan asked, running his fingers through her hair. "Does it bother me that people talk? No. Does it bother me that the world thinks we're doing something wrong, sometimes? And what do you think?" Isabel turned to face him. "I think that love doesn't choose social conventions. I think that two people who met as strangers, who fell in love before knowing of any biological connection, have the right to define their own relationship, even if the whole world disagrees." "Especially because the whole world disagrees," Isabel smiled. "After all, where would the fun be if it were easy?" Nathan kissed her, a long and deep kiss that spoke of future promises and commitments. "Maid Isabel Hayes Blackwell," he murmured against her lips. "Yes? Marry me?" She laughed, a pure and musical sound that mingled with the sound of the waves. "Nathan Victor Blackwell, are you asking a woman to marry you?" "I'm asking the woman I love to marry me. The rest are just technical details." "Then, yes, I'll marry you, despite everything, because of everything, forever." 2 years later, they were married in a private ceremony on a private island in the Caribbean, with only Sophia as a witness. Sophia, who had become an advocate for the rights of kidnapping victims and was using her story to help other people escape from situations of abuse. The world continued talking, speculating, judging. But Nathan and Isabel learned that true love doesn't need the world's approval to exist. It only needs the courage of two people to choose each other, repeatedly, every day, despite all the reasons they might have not to. And at night, when they were alone in their house on the American coast, watching the stars reflect in the ocean, they knew they had found something rare and precious, a love that had survived family secrets, death threats, blackmail, kidnapping, and the judgment of an entire society. A love that had begun between the spaces, between hotel rooms, between truths and lies, between danger and safety, and that now occupied all the space in their lives. Isabel never went back to hiding. Nathan never went back to running from himself. And together they proved that sometimes the best love stories are those that the whole world says are impossible. Because in the end, the heart doesn't understand genetics. The heart only understands connection, passion, choice. And they had chosen each other against all odds, despite all obstacles. And they lived happily ever after, not because it was easy, but because it was true.